For 3 seconds, forget everything you think you know about this war, because the next few moments will show you how a single conflict is ripping through cities, energy systems, military defenses, and even global markets at the same time. What is happening right now is not just an exchange of fire, it is a slow-motion breakdown of an entire regional order. Israel is under pressure from a wave after wave of Iranian attacks that are hitting harder, reaching deeper, and exposing weaknesses that many people never expected to see. Tel Aviv is not just on alert, it is living through one of the most intense bombardment cycles in its modern history. And Haifa is not just a secondary target, it is becoming a battlefield for energy, logistics, and industrial survival. Stay with me, because by the end of this story you will understand why this is no longer only about missiles, but about whether entire systems can keep functioning under sustained attack. On March 25th alone, 9 separate attack waves struck Israel in a single day. 4 of those waves hit greater Tel Aviv, 4 hit the south, and 1 struck the north. That is not random pressure. That is a deliberate pattern designed to stretch defenses until they start failing in real time. Since the war began, roughly 40% of all incoming fire has been aimed at one metropolitan zone, Greater Tel Aviv. That means nearly 4 million people are living under constant threat, while sirens, interceptions, explosions, and shelter warnings have become part of daily life. Iran is not firing blindly. Iran is mixing ballistic missiles and kamikaze drones inside the same salvos. That matters because each weapon behaves differently, flies differently, and forces Israel's defenses to react differently. Some weapons fly fast and high. Some move lower and slower. Some are meant to overwhelm radar. Others are meant to drain interceptors. Together, they create a trap that forces even advanced defense systems to choose what to stop first and what to let through. The 81st wave alone struck more than 70 separate targets across the country, including Haifa, Diona, and both sides of Tel Aviv. The 82nd wave went after what the IRGC described as military command and control centers and nuclear-linked industries. That is the real story here. This is not just punishment, this is attrition. And attrition is what makes modern air defense bleed. One of the clearest signs of that pressure came when a missile struck an apartment block in Tel Aviv. That missile was not some unknown, impossible-to-stop weapon. The IDF admitted it had intercepted that exact class of missile before, so the failure was not because the system had never seen the threat. The failure was because too many threats arrived at once. Interceptor magazines deplete, radar sensors saturate, crews get exhausted, and when the numbers stop working, warheads hit the ground. That is how defense systems break. Not in a single dramatic collapse, but in a grind. A grind measured in waves, seconds, fuel, and missile stockpiles. Tel Aviv municipality official Shai Gateno told the Knesset that 11% of the city's residents cannot reach a certified shelter within a reasonable time during a siren. That is an alarming figure in any city. In a city under repeated bombardment, it is a warning sign. There are 560 protection facilities and 20 portable shelters. Yet even that is not enough to cover the reality on the ground. In South Tel Aviv, some shelters are overcrowded, some are vandalized, some are unsafe, some are simply unavailable when people need them most. That means 1 in 10 people in a city under fire may have no reliable safe place to run. And that is where the human cost of this war stops being theoretical. Because every siren is now a race between fear, distance, and survival. Now look at Haifa, because what is happening there is different. Tel Aviv is being pressured as a population center, but Haifa is being targeted as an industrial nerve center. The real objective is not just to damage buildings. The real objective is to cripple the logistics that keep Israel's military operational. The Bison Group oil refinery in Haifa Bay is one of Israel's most important refining hubs. It helps process fuel that supports the Air Force, armored vehicles, and civilian transport. That makes it far more than an industrial site. It is part of the machinery of national endurance. Iran has openly said it is targeting sensitive and strategic centers in Haifa. That includes fuel depots used by Israeli fighter jets and shipyards, where naval vessels are maintained for operations in the eastern Mediterranean. In other words, this is not symbolic fire. This is an attack on the backbone of mobility, power, and sustained warfighting. On March 19th, 6 separate missile barrages hit northern Israel in a single day. The Bison refinery was damaged again. That was the second strike on that facility in under a year. 12 fire and rescue teams were deployed to the site. Firefighters disconnected power lines, ran cooling operations, and searched for hazardous leaks. That kind of response tells you something important. It tells you the strike was serious enough to force an emergency industrial response, not just a standard security inspection. The refinery later disclosed that critical infrastructure belonging to the Israel Natural Gas Lines Company had been damaged. That system feeds the gas powering the refinery's production units. Without that supply, the refinery may need to fall back on liquefied petroleum gas. And that is where wartime pressure starts colliding with civilian scarcity. Military fuel competes with household fuel. Industrial supply collides with domestic supply. Every disruption pulls on a larger chain. That chain is exactly what Iran appears to be targeting. Professor Marcelo Sternberg of Tel Aviv University described the refinery publicly as a time bomb. He warned that a direct hit on the primary distillation units could release toxic clouds severe enough to force mass evacuation across the entire Haifa Bay area. Avi Yuhan, head of the Haifa Bay Cities Association for Environmental Protection, called it Russian roulette and demanded the government accelerate the relocation of the complex within months. The relocation plan exists on paper, but paper plans do not stop missiles. The government has already faced warnings that the site is irreplaceable to Israel's national energy security, so the war has turned a long-term planning problem into an immediate crisis. Most people watch this conflict and assume Iran is just firing in anger at Israeli cities. The reality is far more calculated. Iran is carrying out a phased attrition strategy across 84 deliberate waves. Each wave is designed to do two things at once. First, drain Israel's interceptor stockpiles. Second, degrade the infrastructure that fuels Israel's war effort. That is why the Bison refinery matters. That is why gas pipelines matter. That is why offshore energy platforms matter. These are not emotional targets. These are arterial targets. And when arterial targets start taking damage, the pressure does not stay local for long. Before the first missile landed, the government ordered the shutdown of Israel's Karish and Leviathan offshore gas fields. Those fields are operated by Energy, Chevron New Energy, and Ratio Energies. That decision shows how quickly the energy sector moved into emergency mode. Israel's system has been running under wartime protocol from the very beginning. Now zoom out, because this is where the conflict stops being only regional. The next layer is not Tel Aviv or Haifa. The next layer is Moscow. Most people think this is a simple two-sided exchange between Iran and Israel, with Washington standing somewhere nearby. But Russia has entered the equation with hardware, intelligence, and production support. Western officials and analysts say Russia has been helping Iran with intelligence and with improved drone-related know-how. That includes upgraded Shahed-type systems that are more resilient than earlier Iranian versions. Analysts have said Iran does not need more drones. It needs better drones. And that is exactly what Russia appears to be helping provide. One report found that nearly 90% of Shahed assembly now takes place inside Russia. That means the weapon was designed in Iran, industrialized in Russia, and then upgraded through a shared production chain. Russia is also reported to have supplied satellite imagery and targeting data to Iranian forces. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia is helping Iran strike American positions across the region. Whether you view that as battlefield coordination or strategic alignment, the message is the same. This is no longer a purely local conflict. It is becoming a connected axis of pressure. And then came the moment that broke this war through its geographic ceiling. On March 18th, the Israeli Air Force struck Bandar Anzali on Iran's Caspian Sea coast. That was the first Israeli military strike ever conducted in the Caspian. The IDF destroyed an Iranian Navy corvette, 4 missile boats, multiple auxiliary vessels, a naval command center, and a shipyard. That was not just a strike on a port. That was a strike on an entire maritime node. The U.S. Defense Secretary identified Bandar Anzali as a primary corridor for Russian weapons flowing into Iran. A former Israeli Navy commander said the purpose was to limit Russian smuggling and to prove that Iran had no meaningful naval shield in the Caspian. That port had become a major artery for weapons transfers between Moscow and Tehran since 2022. In 2023 alone, Iran reportedly moved more than 300,000 artillery shells and 1 million rounds of ammunition to Russia through that route. Now the direction has reversed. Russia is shipping upgraded drones and equipment south, while Israel is hitting the route itself. Kremlin officials warned that further escalation in the Caspian would be viewed extremely negatively. Russia's foreign ministry also condemned the strike and described Bandar Anzali as an important logistics hub supporting Russian-Iranian trade. Analysts noted that cargo volumes through that port had tripled over the past year. So Israel did not just hit an Iranian naval base, it hit the physical supply chain connecting two allied powers. And Moscow noticed. Then Israel went further. In strikes on Bandar Abbas, it killed IRGC Navy Commander Alireza Tangsiri and the head of the Navy's intelligence branch, Bayam Ray. IDF spokesman Brigadier General Fine said publicly that the eliminations will not stop. He also confirmed that the military has struck more than 1,000 targets tied to Iran's weapons production infrastructure so far. That number matters because it suggests scale, persistence, and a strategy that goes well beyond symbolic retaliation. Meanwhile, Russia and Iran agreed in December 2025 to a deal covering 500 portable air defense launchers and 2,500 missiles over a 3-year period. Iran also requested the S-400, Russia's most advanced air defense platform. Moscow turned that request down, apparently fearing that deploying it could drag Russian personnel directly into the war. But everything short of that appears to be moving. Now take this one step further because the economic blast radius is becoming impossible to ignore. Before February 28th, Brent crude was sitting around $69 to $72 a barrel. By March 20th, it had surged sharply. On March 26th, Brent spiked again after Iran publicly denied any direct negotiations with Washington. On its worst days, crude briefly crossed $119, climbing more than 60% above pre-war levels. California gasoline moved above $5 a gallon during the second week of March. Goldman Sachs raised its U.S. recession probability to 30%. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries roughly 20% of global oil consumption, has been functionally shut since Iran closed it on March 4th. Tanker traffic has dropped to almost nothing. That is not just a regional shipping issue. That is a global energy shock. Energy officials have warned that the disruption to oil, gas, and fertilizer flows is among the worst the world has faced in decades. Qatar Energy declared force majeure on liquefied natural gas contracts. European gas prices surged more than 20%. Europe entered this crisis already weakened, with gas reserves sitting well below prior years. And that weakness is now being exposed in real time. Here is the contradiction almost nobody wants to calculate. Iran is absorbing one of the heaviest aerial bombardment campaigns in modern Middle Eastern history. General Brad Cooper of U.S. Central Command confirmed more than 8,000 Iranian targets have been struck. And yet, Iran is still the only major oil exporter moving crude through the Strait of Hormuz. Bloomberg reported that Tehran has earned hundreds of millions of dollars in extra oil revenue since the war began, selling mostly to China at a very small discount to Brent. That means the side under the heaviest military pressure is still finding a way to turn the crisis into cash flow. Meanwhile, Israel is paying an enormous price for each interception. One side is spending roughly $320,000 per David's Sling interceptor and about $650,000 per Arrow 3. The other side is launching one-way drones at around $30,000 each. More than 3,000 of those drones have already been launched since February 28th. That creates a brutal economic imbalance. Israel is spending 5 to 10 times more money per engagement than Iran spends on the weapon that triggers it. That is why this war is not only about who can hit harder, it is about who can keep paying the bill. Fertilizer exports from the Gulf have collapsed alongside the oil shock. The region supplies a huge share of global sulfur, and Asian nations depend heavily on Gulf producers for urea, sulfur, and ammonia. Analysts are projecting that nitrogen fertilizer prices could double from 2024 levels. And this is happening during the Northern Hemisphere spring planting window. That means food prices are next. This is how a war that begins with missiles ends up in supermarkets, shipping lanes, power grids, and household budgets across the world. Trump extended his deadline for striking Iranian power plants by 10 days to April 6th, posting that talks were going very well. But Iran's foreign minister said indirect exchanges through mediators do not count as negotiations. Iran rejected the American ceasefire proposal and presented its own terms. 6 American service members have been confirmed killed. An F-35 made an emergency landing on March 19th after a suspected hit by Iranian forces. Congress is now facing the possibility of a supplemental war appropriation that could reach $200 billion. Thousands of Israelis are queuing at land border crossings with Egypt and Jordan trying to leave. The International Energy Agency is calling this the worst energy security crisis ever recorded. And through all of it, Iran is still moving oil through the strait and earning more per barrel today than before the first bomb fell. That is the core paradox of this war. One side is trying to survive the assault. The other side is trying to make the assault too expensive to continue. So the real question is not which side is winning in the usual sense. The real question is which side can sustain the cost of losing it. If you found this breakdown useful, like the video, share it, and comment your opinion on who has the upper hand right now. And if you want more updates like this, subscribe to Market Mindset.